welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope your week is off to a great start. Wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to actually do a little bit of like a preview video. So do me a favor and make sure you like this video, share it with other people, repost it, and do click that bell button below if you would like to subscribe to the channel. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday using tarot and astrology to try to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. I wanted to do a preview, a brief previewing of some of the bigger transits in 2025. This will probably be a series of videos as we're getting closer to the end of the year. I'm actually working on some like deep dive stuff. I'm going to be doing some webinars on some of these ingresses, as well as my New Year's Day presentation. If you guys haven't seen some of those, I kind of go into the bigger themes for the year ahead. We talk about the 12 rising signs. It's a good time. So you'll hear me talk a lot about this stuff as we kind of get into 2025. But yeah, I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I have been looking at the transits of 2025 and 2026 for a very long time, probably the better part of like the last 5 or 6 years. I've been looking at the planetary changes that will be coming in 2025. And yeah, as the end of the year kind of approaches, I've been really thinking about putting out like a preview video. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Please do leave me your comments below. Give me some feedback. Let me know, is 2025 a big year for you? Are you seeing some of these planetary ingresses making some moves in your chart? And what do you guys think about some of the changes that will be going on with these planets? Those of you guys who are not aware, we have lots and lots of new energy in 2025 and 2026. Pretty much all major outer planets are going to be in new signs. And this is a really big deal, especially since they are all aspecting one another, 2025 and 2026. So Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, as well as Uranus will all be going into new signs. Pluto at the tail end of 2024 is re-emerging in the sign of Aquarius, where it will stay for the better part of the next 20 years. Obviously, all of these outer planets changing signs, reaching the 29 degrees and kind of dipping in and out next year is a sign of change, major change next year. We're moving away from heavy feminine energy. So we have actually seen Pluto in Capricorn on and off for this last year. We have also seen Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Pisces. So these are signs that are feminine, they're receptive, they can be inward, and it also deals with major changes out in the world. Capricorn deals with top-down structures, government, and anything revolving around kind of responsibility, governments, and those who I think who are making big decisions in the world, like leaders can be kind of connected to Capricorn. And then Pisces, we know, deals with the more mystical, magical, spiritual, but also this theme of self-undoing. That's why it seemed a little kind of crazy the last year or two with Saturn and Neptune being in the sign of Pisces. It's really hard to determine fact from fiction. And we are going to be seeing a shift into much more masculine energy. We're seeing planets that are going to be moving into Aries, Gemini, as well as Aquarius. So this is all air and fire. This is about dynamic energy, initiations, adventure, new beginnings, and lots revolving around technology as well as information and travel. So there's major action taking place, climactic endings that will be kind of taking place in 2025 with planets finishing up the 29 degrees. So we'll actually see a lot of these planets retrograding back into Capricorn or back into Pisces. And it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this manifests. You know, Pluto's in Capricorn right now, so we're actually going to see that retrograde. The retrograde is complete, but we're going to see, you know, Pluto's kind of final transit through Capricorn taking place in 2024. So really the only retrogrades we're going to be seeing are going to be involving Saturn, Neptune, as well as Uranus. But essentially, 2025 is the spark, right? This is lighting the match of what will eventually be a brand new world. And while a lot of astrologers you're going to see online are talking about how intense these changes are, that the astrology of 2025 and 2026 is not for the faint of heart, I see this as an opportunity to begin again. So I wanted to touch on the themes of some of these ingresses. Obviously, there's so much more going on. Yes, we are going to have, Mercury retrogrades. We are going to see a pretty significant Venus retrograde. We have eclipses that are also going to be in new signs. We're going to start seeing eclipses next year that will be taking place in Virgo as well as Pisces. But I'm going to save some of that for other videos and also for my 2025 presentation. So let's set the stage a little bit and see what this looks like. And I want to start first with, obviously, I'm going to talk about the planetary ingresses in their order. So I'm going to go in order of the planets and when they're kind of moving into new signs. Those of you guys who aren't aware, an ingress just basically means a planet is changing signs. So we see the sun ingress, from one sign to the next, roughly about every month. We see the moon ingress every 2.5, 3 days. So outer planet ingresses are not as common. We see them, it varies in years depending on, the planetary cycle. But to see all of these planets do it within months of each other in the same year is a very, very big deal. So we will actually see all planets change signs in 2025, which is a bit of like an unusual phenomenon. So 25 in a nutshell is not just another year. I see this as like a turning point where a lot of the celestial events could offer the very fabric of our society an opportunity for personal growth, creating an end of, an era and moving us or ushering us into this period of transformation as well as innovation. Now we're going to start talking first about the first planet that's going to be on the move, and this is going to be Neptune. So for a number of years, like I said, Neptune has been in Pisces, and in 2025, we will see Neptune go in and out of Aries and Pisces. But right around the end of March in 2025, on the 30th, we are going to see Neptune enter into Aries. So let's look at that. So obviously this is next year, and we will see both Saturn and Neptune will cross that 0 degrees Aries point. And I'm sure I will say this a lot over the next 6 months, but 0 degrees of Aries is a degree that's going to get triggered quite a bit. The beginning of the year, the North Node will conjunct 0 degrees of Aries. We will see a Mercury and a Venus retrograde through this particular degree. Then we will see Neptune come into Aries at 0 degrees. And then shortly after, we will see Saturn cross 0 degrees of Aries. Now I'll get into what that means in a second, but what you need to know is this. Neptune going into Aries is really kind of infusing this fiery spirit of energy, of Aries energy, with the kind of nebulous, dreamlike quality of Neptune, right? Usually we think of Neptune and its association with Pisces, which is spiritual and dreamy, and it can be about religion and mysticism. It can also be about the oceans. It can be about water, mental health, healthcare, all of that stuff. So we're throwing a watery planet into a fiery kind of cardinal energy. So it's a little discombobulated in that sense. I do think that this transit can really inspire us to chase after ideals with passion that we've never experienced, okay? So Aries is initiating a new energy. It's brand new. This is the energy of Mars, right? Cardinal fire. So it's going to be pushing us towards spiritual or creative endeavors where we really seek to express our individuality, because Aries is the individual. It's our self. It's our own personal identity. It is that I am theme when we think about the zodiac. So for many of us, we might feel called to break away from conventional paths and probably seeking new forms of spiritual or religious beliefs. There could be a sense of more emotional independence, and this could be through art, new age practices, or pioneering technologies. Now, I think about the collective impact, right? That's just kind of like Neptune and Aries in a nutshell, and that's really condensing it. We can really kind of get into the nitty gritty in the future, but collectively, Neptune and Aries, I think, is really blending idealism with action, right? Potentially leading to pioneering movements in spirituality. It could also be in technology. Neptune's influence might inspire a new wave of individualistic expression in spiritual or creative pursuits. And this is going to be challenging old structures with visionary ideas. So when we think of Neptune's connection to, magic, it could also be about healthcare. It could be about film, cinema, art, music. There is going to be obviously a major change and shift in how those particular creative themes are kind of coming out in the world. Now, when I think about aspects that we're going to be seeing involving, Neptune, obviously right around the time of Neptune's ingress, we're going to see the Venus and Mercury retrograde. I mean, literally just a few days prior, Mercury and Venus are retrograding over this point. So it's obvious to me that when it comes to, how we're thinking, how we're communicating, how we're learning, as well as love, money, resources, all of this is being reworked for all of us, right? Think of the 0 degrees of Aries point as like a reset point. 29 degrees of Pisces is where we let it all wash away. This is also about the collective, where we are all collectively going through some kind of an experience. The North Node is there, so it is very mystical and magical. But for some of us, it can also feel like there is some sense of crumbling or dissolving when it comes to, what we have believed in or what we thought we knew, or, it could be about religion. It could be also about, healthcare and anything revolving around hospitals or prisons, all these Pisces things. So Neptune being there is kind of saying, okay, all of this is kind of being peeled away, or we're reworking something so we can start new, right? And obviously Neptune's association with Pisces could be new themes revolving around water exploration. It could also be about mental health. It could be about drugs, about alcohol, anything revolving also around our own personal faith, right? Neptune does have that connection to the ethers, and it's like divine. One major aspect outside of these retrogrades that you're going to see that is going to be in play throughout the year will be Neptune's sextile to Pluto. Now, we have had that for like the last year or so. We've seen Neptune in Pisces sextiling Pluto in Capricorn. Quite frankly, I kind of feel like, Pluto in Capricorn has very much had a death grip, right? When it comes to control, when it comes to like leadership. And for some of us, it's had us feeling with Neptune and Pisces very just like disjointed. We have felt isolated. Maybe some of us have felt like it's had an impact on our mental health. It has also had a huge impact on the way that we are looking at where society is kind of going, right? Neptune and Pisces, the last degrees is like, feels like everything's melting down and kind of going down the drain. But when we have Neptune in a fire sign, which is going to be more about action and initiation, when it comes to our dreams, when it comes to our beliefs, when it comes to our spirituality and our vision, it's in alignment in a healthy sextile to Pluto in Aquarius, which is about a waking up of the collective. This is about a revolution. This is about a shock. This is an upgrade also to society. Yes, the internet, technology, right? All of those Pluto and Aquarius things. And how that is paving the way and making it possible for individuals to be more in tune with creativity. So if we do have upgrades in technology and these advancements, and let's say that there is a decent percentage potentially in the future that AI and all these other, technological advancements can be positive, right? If they can be utilized for good things, does that free up more time for individuals to create, to dance, to play, to make music, to write poetry, all of these things where now we have more capabilities of being able to be creative, or be more, in a position of being able to dream, right? And to pray and do all those like Neptunian things. So the sextile between Neptune and Pluto will be very different than what we've experienced in recent years. Everything is brand new, and it's going to be where individuals are dreaming about this collective new future for humanity and the role that we play on an individual level in some of those changes. So I think that it's going to be subtle but very potent, and it can facilitate breakthroughs where like idealism is meeting revolutionary change, potentially in technology and society and also environmental spheres. Now, the second major ingress that we're going to see is going to be Saturn going into Aries. So we will see that in May. So just a few months later, at the end of May, Saturn will, there we go. Saturn will move into Aries. So it looks like this is going to be happening around the 24th. And like I said, both Saturn and Neptune will go in and out. So they're not going to stay there all year long. Both of them will actually retrograde back into Pisces. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. So now we have Saturn going into Aries. So same themes, right? Aries initiating the self-starter, brand new opportunities. But Saturn is a very different energy. Saturn is a planet that deals with responsibility. It deals with timing, maturity, karma, right? It does still deal with like government and leadership, but now it's being seen through the lens of Aries, which is going to be the individual. So Saturn's ingress into Aries, I think, is going to bring like quite a weighty like reality check to our desires for independence and leadership. I think this period might feel like a test of endurance as we're compelled to like structure our ambitions with discipline and perseverance, right? Saturn and Neptune is there as well. So, Saturn in the sign, we're going to be asked to mature in how we assert ourselves, because Aries is a sign that's about kind of asserting ourselves, but Saturn creates the structure. This is obviously going to give us some challenges that require us to like really prove ourselves. It's going to be leading to significant personal growth or transformation in how we are approaching life. So Saturn does not perform very well in this sign, right? Usually we like to see Saturn in Capricorn or Aquarius, where it's like at home or in its domicile. Saturn's exalted in the sign of Libra. So this is where it really excels when it comes to partnership and diplomacy. But when Saturn is in this, particular placement in Aries, it's almost like in no man's land. Like Saturn is seen as like the king or the leader in some regard. And Saturn being in Aries is like, taking a planet that needs structure, it needs rules, it needs regulations, it needs to be able to know the boundaries, and you're throwing it into the wild, and it's having to figure out how to, survive and like how to forage. So I think that there is some challenges with that ingress inherently. I think there's also some issues where, it's kind of saying like, nobody's going to come to save us. We are going to have to learn how to kind of create our own new boundaries. We're going to have to learn how to maybe be more so self-reliant, right? Or entrepreneurial or capable of standing on our own 2 feet. And this is also going to require us to know our own personal boundaries. This is going to be about us also needing to be more in touch with our bodies. Obviously, Aries deals with like the physical kind of like status of the body, like the physical experience. It could be about vitality. It could be also about reproduction, because Aries is life. And Saturn being in this particular sign makes me feel like the lesson here is going to be about taking discipline and applying it in a very personal manner, not blaming other people for why things have been falling apart and going wrong. We're learning to kind of take responsibility ourselves and really put forth like some pioneering efforts. So this could be a time where we're very ambitious about setting goals, and we have to take a very structured approach, and we have to know how to be more mature, how to be more responsible. And we're going to be learning a lot about discipline in pursuit of personal and collective projects. Now, on the world stage, I'm expecting major changes with leadership. We may see, people who are more decisive, they're more impulsive, they're younger, they have new ideas, they want to step in and they want to make sweeping changes, and they want it to be fast. And this could be a time where societies are forced also to like reassess their structures, potentially, leading to reforms that prioritize individual responsibility over collective welfare. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it may lead to, in some places, stronger rights for the individual. Maybe it's going to be, in some places, having the capability of being more so self-governing, if that's at all possible. I do think that it's unusual because we will also see Saturn sextile Pluto, right? So we're getting this new kind of lesson revolving around maturity, growth, and like needing to make our own way. And the sextile to Pluto is saying, well, that will help the collective evolve. That will help us change. That will help society grow. As if we see some people who are going to be like, I will build it. I will step up. I will lead, and individuals are starting to kind of put that theme of Saturn's structure and their goals, and also like really aligning themselves with a new identity and blending that harmonious energy of Neptune, which could be about their vision for themselves. Like, what have you always dreamed that you wanted to be, right? Now you have the opportunity to be that. And in starting these new, I guess, like intentions or these new like habits, we have the ability to create new societies. We can create new groups. We can create new tribes. And we can bring groups of people together who really want to initiate and kind of see this change for the world. What's interesting is that we will see the conjunction. And so the actual conjunction between Saturn and Neptune per degree and minute will not take place until closer to around February of 2026. So you're not going to see the exact conjunction in 2025, but like we're splitting hairs here, they're going to be conjunct. It's going to be enough for you to kind of feel the impact of that energy. And I think the conjunction to Neptune, it may initially in 2025 kind of like cloud structures with idealism, but it can also suggest a potential for creating systems that blend practicality with visionary concepts. So I kind of see 2025 as the year that like we have our training wheels, we're like, I'd really like to be able to ride the bike, but I don't know how to ride the bike. So I'm going to take the training wheels out and kind of see how it goes. And we kind of get a feel for it before we get to 2026 and like the wheels come off, right? And then we're able to kind of really move from just test driving to being like, we're doing this brand new thing. And so the conjunction in itself is interesting because not only is this conjunction extremely, extremely unusual, like we will see Saturn and Neptune align, I think it's like roughly every 35 to 38 years. So it's a cycle that we see, pretty regularly. It's not unusual. What's unusual is that it's happening at 0 degrees, which is the first degree of the zodiac, right? 0 degrees of Aries is like the shot out of the cannon. This is, we strike the match, like something new is initiated, like there is some kind of life. There's a new beginning that comes from that. So to see Saturn and Neptune align exactly at 0 degrees means collectively we're all hitting the restart button, right? And for you in your own life, it's going to be where Aries is in your chart. What I've looked at is that we have not seen anything like this in our lifetime. And I mean like literally in our lifetime. It's been hundreds, if not thousands of years since we've seen something similar to this. We can go back and see the last time we saw a similar conjunction, which was in the Bronze Age, right? Which is when we developed weapons. And this is when we created armor and like the art of war and everything was being developed. And we were seeing like military, the concept of military coming together and also creating weapons, the development of metals and how we actually kind of evolved from that. So I'll save that for my longer presentation, but I mean, my goodness, like that means a whole other laundry list of things revolving around war. I mean, you can't talk about Aries without that, and that there is going to be new lessons and themes revolving around war. It may be movements revolving around trying to create peace, right? Neptune and ceasing war, but that's only going to happen if individuals decide to stand up and say there will be no more wars. We will no longer fund these wars. We will create boundaries and limits revolving around, acts of war. So perhaps that's one way it manifests. Obviously, new technology and war, you don't need astrology to tell you that that's happening, but we will see that happen throughout the next couple of years as well. But for right now, the conjunction, in 2025 and 2026, when I think about this, like when I was sitting down to start doing my research, and I've been reading books and doing all kinds of research on this particular topic, something that kept coming up for me over and over, and maybe it's just me, I have Saturn conjunct Neptune exactly. I was born in 1989. And something that's always happened for me is like when I'm sitting and doing like a clairvoyant reading or I'm meditating on something, music comes up for me, right? Making that connection between the lesson and structure and music or inspiration. Neptune. Frank Sinatra's My Way was kind of playing in my head. So if you haven't heard that song, pause this video, open up another tab on YouTube, go and listen to that song. That encapsulates so much, I think, of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. doing it your way, reflecting on what has happened, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, right? And reflecting on the past and then learning to look at it and being like, yeah, but I did it my way, you know? And then when we're looking in the future, if you're gonna do something, you don't wanna look back and have regrets, right? This is the time to do something new. The time is now. 2025 and 2026 is when you wanna take risks. I thought about that song and I was like, that's so perfect. So you guys have to listen to it. So 0 degrees, right? Once again, we'll talk about this even as we get into 2026 because the exact conjunction won't be until then. But when I think about this, I think about the Sabian symbol. So the Sabian symbol for 1 degree of Aries, so we round up, so it'll be 0 degrees, but we're going to round up to 1. This is a woman rising from the ocean, okay? So it's a symbol of a woman coming out of the ocean and embracing a seal. So the symbol of the woman rising from the ocean suggests new beginnings, emergence from the unconscious or unknown depths into conscious awareness or action. So the transformation here is, there's a seal and the seal is embracing her, and it can symbolize a connection to primal or instinctual nature, indicating a union or transformation where human consciousness, the woman, integrates with deeper, perhaps more instinctual or animalistic aspects of herself, the seal. So it's a symbol that's about integration, right? The integration of the different parts of the self where the rational or conscious mind, the woman, merges with the emotional or intuitive side of herself, the seal. There's also this connection to like primordial, connection. So it might speak to like the reconnection or acknowledgement of our primordial roots, suggesting a return or an acknowledgement of our origins, perhaps in a spiritual or evolutionary sense. How interesting that we're going to see Saturn and Neptune dance in Pisces, go into Aries, retrograde back into Pisces, come back, and then finally connect in Aries. I have hopes with the North Node and everything being there that over the next 2 years, we have some extraordinary evidence and information that ends up kind of coming out in the world that literally frees humanity, that we learn where we came from, that we recognize that we are all like divinely connected. I'm hoping that we find Atlantis. I'm hoping that we find some kind of connection that shows us that we really came from the stars, right? Or that we really, came from some kind of connection to elevated beings. Neptune can very much be about the ocean, but it can also be about otherworldly things and other places and kind of being out in space, believe it or not. It's more so connected to Neptune than it is to Aquarius or Uranus. Is the truth about our origins as humans going to kind of come about, which in turn can spark this complete reworking, rethinking shift when it comes to our belief system, how we look at culture, how we look at history, how we look at religion, and whether or not we have been told the truth or if we have had the wool pulled over our eyes, so we just, have had lacked that knowledge and that connection to our roots and where we come from, which in turn has made us feel like we're incomplete. That's kind of my feeling on it. I don't know. That's just my perspective. I think that, Aries is inherently tribal. I mean, this is a sign that was known for being nomadic. They would go from place to place. They wouldn't put down roots. They didn't, necessarily stay with partners or relationships. It was all about survival. So when I think about the Saturn-Neptune connection here, it's like, where do we learn how to slow down and make that connection? Moving away from this belief system that we have to go to church, we have to go to temple to meet with God. Right? Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is very much like your body is a temple and you have the capability of connecting with, some kind of higher being, but it's within you, learning more maybe about like the God particle and other things that kind of connect our bodies to our consciousness, which in turn we are all kind of connected to some source. I think we're going to learn more about some of that stuff. I do think that this is also going to be about the ocean, because Saturn and Neptune are there. It can represent emotional or, subconscious kind of connections, because that could be Neptune as well. It can also mean that this is like a symbol that's pointing towards emerging from emotional depths or challenges with like a new integrated sense of self. Nurturing and protection, obviously the woman with the seal in the symbol, it can talk about like nurturing and protecting and the need for emotional support during times of transformation and emergence. But 1 degrees of Aries is where something new begins. It's very, very, very relevant to the Saturn-Neptune connection because it represents a new structure revolving around our beliefs, revolving around our vision, our spirituality, our religious, standings, moving forward. So the conjunction itself in this particular sign and degree is suggesting a collective or personal emergence from a period of emotional or spiritual obscurity into a phase where we're integrating our deepest, often hidden aspects into our conscious life. So it's speaking to the themes of like rebirth, transformation, and also nurturing, support needing during a significant personal or collective evolution. Now, happening at the very start of Aries, I think is representing what Saturn and Neptune brings to the table, right? The crumbling of old structures in favor of new visionary approaches and also potentially affecting global economies or political systems. Now, the Saturn-Neptune connection, like this conjunction, it happens roughly every 35 to 36 years. And I'll give you guys a couple quick examples of the past, but it's blending Saturn's structure and discipline and reality with Neptune's illusion, idealism, as well as spirituality. So when we think about the themes of the Saturn-Neptune connection, for me, it's always reality versus illusion. And the irony is that a conjunction isn't one thing versus the other. They merge, they come together. So this conjunction, it does in some ways challenge our perception of reality. Saturn grounds Neptune's kind of like boundless imagination into tangible structures. It's where we make our dreams a reality, which, by the way, Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, we've had that throughout this year. They're not connected yet. They're not conjunct, but we've had that theme kind of coming up. And for most of us, it's more a dream. It's in our imagination. It's something we're praying for. We're kind of visualizing. But now when we see it kind of go through the sign of Aries, I think that it's going to be about highlighting where our dreams meet real world challenges. And then if we really want to make a change, if we really want to do something new, what is it going to cost us, right? And I think in Aries, it's going to cost us our old life, right? It's going to be about rolling up your sleeves and kind of picking yourselves up by the bootstraps and not feeling like a victim like we have with Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. This is going to be where the future is going to be built by doers. It's not going to be by dreamers. And it's great to dream and be creative, but it's going to be about actually taking action, making your dreams a reality, like chasing after them and initiating them, even if you don't know where it's going to go. Remember, Aries is about starting things. It's not always about finishing them. So we're initiating new things because of our beliefs, because of our, spiritual beliefs. It could also be about our new loves. I mean, I think about Neptune, which is like a higher octave of Venus. So it can be about something that we love so much, something we want so bad that we're willing to make that personal sacrifice. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, there's also this theme revolving around idealism versus practicality. It's a period where this is definitely tested. Dreams and visions, for a better world, they're going to face some kind of test. There is going to be this sense of, pragmatic aspects that need to kind of go through these series of tests, and like we need to implement them basically and make sure that they're going to work. We see spiritual material integration. So there's this push towards integrating spiritual values into our material life, which I think is good. And this could manifest in movements that seek to reform institutions with more humanitarian or spiritual values. But I think this is going to be more about new things that are emerging. I think it's going to be about new moves to be able to protect, preserve, or kind of create these new religions or these new spiritual practices, or teaching people, how to be more so in touch with their inner God, their inner guru, rather than feeling like they have to go to other people to be led. And obviously another thing that comes up is disillusionment and reassessment. So usually Saturn-Neptune periods, they can lead to disillusionment. That can happen. And it's also about, idealistic visions that come up, and like we chase them, and then we are confronted with like the harsh reality that, oh, this may not work, or this is like a pipe dream. So it really prompts a lot of like reassessment of our values, our beliefs, as well as our systems to really make sure, can it work, right? Can this survive? Is this actually a good idea? Now, in the past, when we've seen the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, just like over the last 100 years or so, really briefly, we saw one 1891 to 1892. So this was obviously near the end of the 19th century. And this conjunction coincided with significant changes in labor movements. This is when we saw the rise of socialism and also shifts in artistic expression towards more spiritual or symbolic forms. Ironically, throughout all of the conjunctions, we have seen some type of like dissolving of some type of government, and there has been themes revolving around socialism through almost all of the conjunctions. So I just have to throw that in there. 1928 to 1929. Okay, so obviously there was other stuff going on during this time. Like we saw the stock market crash. This led to the Great Depression. And this is a stark example of like economic dreams crashing into reality. But this was also the time where we saw the rise of cinema as an escape or a reflection of societal moods. Movies were big, major studios were being developed. This is when we saw kind of like Hollywood coming into like its really the beginning of what would ultimately kind of be like the heyday for the movie scene. But I really think about this time that's like where people were idealizing things too much because they wanted to escape the harsh reality of what was going on in the world and some of like the economic issues. 1965 to 1966, okay? So this is the era of counterculture. We had the civil rights movement. We had anti-war protests. Obviously, idealism was high with movements advocating for peace, love, and equality. But it was also a time where we were faced with the harsh realities of the Vietnam War, and like the war was escalating. And we saw the stark kind of separation between younger people who were really adamant about having peace, right? And then simultaneously, we had a lot of things going on in like war that was happening that was being almost like falsely represented, I think, like out in the world. And, you know, obviously a lot of terrible things come from war in general, but especially that one. I think about like the mental health issues that stem from that war and like how that impacted veterans coming home and that they weren't really kind of helped or taken care of. And obviously that had a huge influence at the time also on music. We saw a lot of music during that time that was also very much in alignment with this peaceful movement. And then recently, this is the most recent one, 1989 to 1990. Okay, so this was a time marked obviously by the fall of the Berlin Wall, which marked the end of the Cold War. And this symbolized the collapse of old structures, Saturn, due to, you know, shifts revolving around ideologies. That's Neptune. We also saw the AIDS crisis being highlighted in the harsh reality behind, you know, societal idealism. That was a bit of a different transit though. You know, at the time when Saturn and Neptune, they aligned, Jupiter was in the opposition. And so it was definitely a lot of like changes revolving around, I think, what happened with the fall of the Berlin Wall, you know, the Cold War. We saw a major shift that happened in Europe as a result of that. And the impact, I think, with the Jupiter opposition is that this did have an impact on other countries. Jupiter in Cancer could be foreign countries and how they were involved in that. We know that the United States president at the time was very vocal, you know, saying tear down that wall. And how that may have played a role also in like relations then that those countries would inevitably have with other countries around the world. So now we have this one, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees, right? So for me, I'm like, man, this is about new beginnings. There is going to be an inception of new cycles here. Obviously, we know Aries is about leadership. It's about being pioneering. But I think this is the start of new movements that are going to break away from past norms. Now, when we look at the conjunction and when it happens, you know, inevitably down the road, we'll kind of look at that chart and we'll see what's going on with Mars. That will be in 2026. But I'm going to tell you guys, I know that when those conjunctions are happening, Mars will go through Aries. Okay, Mars will go through Aries at that time. So that's going to be an even more interesting perspective because it's not just Saturn and Neptune aligning. Mars will be there as well. And I have high hopes that this could be a shift away from war, perpetual wars. I think that that is possible. You're going to hear a lot of varying opinions on this. You're going to hear some astrologers that are going to say, oh, World War III is supposed to be starting in the spring of 2026. And if that's their perspective, I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of people who would agree that Mars and Saturn, you know, kind of being like the badasses in astrology, could be talking about the harsh reality of war, but Neptune can also be saying we're dissolving it. It could also be making us realize the impact that this has on individuals, because if there is war that goes on during these transits, it's not going to be something you just hear about on TV. It's not going to be something that you see going on in a foreign place. It will quite literally affect individuals everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, right? The sextile to Pluto could be nuclear things. It could. But I also feel like it doesn't have to be war in the typical sense. I don't think that the war will be the way that people think. I think of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and that it could be this like self-confined prison, that we have created this situation where we are limited, we feel powerless, we feel like we don't have the ability to make decisions, we don't have freedom, and that we're feeling kind of locked down, but that happens as a result of, you know, individuals giving up or not seeing their true capabilities or their true power. And is it possible in 2025 we see some of that? Sure, right? Saturn and Neptune will go back into Pisces, so it's very possible that we see something like that before we see like the spirit kind of rise up in 2026, and then I think it's going to be a very different story. I think the human spirit is extremely resilient, and this is definitely a degree that you're going to see some things pop off in a very big way. Now, I think this is about ourselves. I think this is about our identity. I believe that this is also going to be really encouraging us, you know, to really focus on moving forward. I think this is also prompting a collective redefinition of identity, both personally as well as nationally. There's a huge focus on independence. You can't look at this and say that there isn't, because really there is. But independence will come from innovation and individuals asserting their own personal or individual rights and getting into alignment with what their beliefs are, believing in themselves, not putting their belief in false gods or, you know, politicians or movie stars or anything like that. It's going to be about believing in yourself. So, you know, this conjunction, it does talk about a new age that's coming. And I would say Pluto and Aquarius will do that too, but this is about a new age that's going to be coming. And I do think that it's going to represent the first significant challenge of the Aquarian age, where old structures, right, Saturn, must be, you know, reformed in light of new ideas, Neptune, potentially leading to societal upheavals and innovations in governance, technology, as well as spirituality. Now, obviously, technology is a big thing because Pluto's in Aquarius, and like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to sextile that. So I'm anticipating there's going to be a surge in pioneering new technology. There's going to be a bunch of people who are going to be probably like doing startups. There's going to be this huge focus on advancements in AI. But I also think it's going to be pioneering new spiritual movements. It's not just about technology. It's about blending idealism with practicality. It's about blending spirituality, you know, also with vision for the future or with art. And this is about creating new systems that are going to be reflecting higher truths or collective consciousness. Now, I anticipate there's going to be some global leadership conflict. Like that will happen because there's always this breakdown of leadership when we see Saturn and Neptune, and then there's an emergence of something new. And what's been interesting that's been happening in the midst of this incoming conjunction is we've actually seen already one Jupiter square Saturn. So if you guys think back to August, we saw Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Gemini, and it really represents that archetype of like the father and the son. You know, Saturn is the older, the elder, the old ways, the leader, and Jupiter is like that young spitfire that's full of optimism and potential and possibility and wants to go big. And Saturn has kind of had Jupiter on a bit of a lasso, trying to pull him back and keeping him from expanding too quickly. So we'll see another one of these squares that's going to be taking place in December of 2024. And quite literally, you know, I think this has been more about limitation of information, limitation of travel, you know, definitely issues with censorship revolving around free speech, issues revolving around communicating, connecting. There's been a lot of stuff revolving around telecommunications, outages, issues with cell phones, issues with social media, that kind of stuff. And Saturn in Pisces can also represent where we are unsure of where to kind of assert ourselves. We feel hesitant to, you know, make a change or, you know, kind of step out and share something. And Jupiter in Gemini really is kind of highlighting where we might be doing too much at one time, or that we may not have all of the correct information, or we might be having a variety of different belief systems or perspectives, or too much information. So, there is another theme here that's blended into this that you're going to see. You're going to see Jupiter go into Cancer next year, and Jupiter will square Saturn and Neptune. So it's not just a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It's like also Jupiter square Saturn, which will continue. And it will be in new signs, so it's going to have different themes. But I think this will be leadership, and it's still going to be kind of like this old versus new, right? Jupiter square Saturn. It's also going to be where, Jupiter, I think going into Cancer is going to be talking more about home, family, right? Countries and, their faith, their belief system, their philosophy, their moral, kind of compasses, and whether or not it's clashing or it's in alignment with like this new agenda or this new order, right? Saturn and Neptune and Aries. So it could be that we see with the conjunction that it's bringing about leaders or movements that are fiercely independent, possibly leading to conflicts or revolutions as old guards resist the change and new ideals seek to establish dominance. Do they do that through war? Maybe. Do they do that in a way where instead of it being, a situation where there is a group of people that are leading, or maybe there are different branches of government, that it's kind of like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Now there's going to be one person. And could we see a rise of like dictatorship with this conjunction? Absolutely. That can definitely happen. Especially because I think of like Saturn and Neptune as kind of like this Napoleon-esque kind of complex that's like, I am God now. I'm the one ruling everything. It is only me. Very culty as well. We see with Saturn Neptune, we can see some cult leader type stuff that can kind of emerge. But by the same token, it could be new blood, younger people coming in with a vision for change, a vision that's going to be inspiring some kind of revolution that's helping free society, right? The dark side is, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, right? You will own nothing and be happy. We will see and kind of preside over everything. There will no longer be culture and borders, and there will no longer be, separate religions. Everything will be one. And that is that very Saturn Neptune. Everything merges into the other, right? And then the sextile to Pluto is that emerges from the dark side and development of technology, that emerges from, digital IDs, that emerges from CBDCs, that emerges from control of the internet. But I believe that Saturn and Neptune, when people start to see those glimmers in 2025, they're going to go, hell no, we're not doing that. We're going to forge our own way. We're going to build our own system. Saturn and Neptune definitely, I think, is going to be oil wars, water wars, right? Issues revolving around water scarcity, who has control over oil or gas. Also, there's going to be major technological developments revolving around mental health and wellness, hospitals, self-healing. I mean, I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of like telecommute health type situations too, where it's like individuals can get it on a screen and, they're either talking to somebody who's going to be on an app, or they're talking to a robot, and they're able to kind of get diagnosed and treated much more quickly, right? Aries. So I could go on and on about this, but I guess the final piece for me is just there's going to be a cultural renaissance that we will see. Saturn and Neptune is bringing structure to art, right? Or beauty or mysticism or some kind of sacrifice that we're making, and that manifests as how we make movies, how we write books, how we create music. All of that stuff is going to be brand new. And we'll see it actually leave Pisces, go into Aries, go back into Pisces, go back into Aries. So I think it's going to do some of its best work actually when it's in Pisces, like when it goes retrograde, as a result of some of the things that we see. Certainly Saturn and Neptune in general is lonely. It's the loneliness, the being cast out, being pushed aside kind of vibe. But when it's in Aries, it's going to be, what do we do with that time, right? Are we meditating on something? Are we painting? Are we designing? Are we drawing? Are we praying? So there can be a lot of individuals feeling called to have much more of a creative practice, a religious practice, a spiritual practice with that time that they have. So we will see a total renaissance in art and culture and philosophy. I think we're going to see creators seek to embody new truths or really kind of challenge existing norms, potentially leading to a total revitalization of how we express or understand our culture. So you'll see that 2025 and 2026. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Pluto and Aquarius. I have talked about this a bit. Obviously, right now, Pluto is in Capricorn, okay? It's going to be moving back into Aquarius. You're going to see this on November 19th, 2024. So we are in the final throes of Pluto in Capricorn. We've had Pluto in and out of Aquarius for like the last year plus. So we've seen little snippets of the future. It has certainly been colorful. I'm going to tell you guys, it's going to go off with a bang, okay? The Mars retrograde in opposition to Pluto, whoo, it's going to get hot. So Pluto and Aquarius, we've already gotten a sample. Now that we've had a sample, the Mars retrograde in December through the spring of 2025 in opposition to Pluto is going to be big. It's going to be a big bang, essentially, is kind of what I think. And Pluto is now here to stay. So Pluto will be in Aquarius for the better part of like the next almost 20 years, actually until March of 2043. Pluto will be in Aquarius, but in 2025, it'll only go from about 0 to 3 degrees. So if you have anything 0 to 3 degrees, you're going to be kind of visited by Pluto in this next year. Essentially, you know, Pluto's moving to Aquarius. It's profound shifts. Pluto is the slowest moving of all of the planets, right? It takes the longest to kind of get through a sign than any other planet. Major metamorphosis through technology, society systems, and the very concept of community. So this could mean like shedding old identities for ones that resonate with something that's more interconnected. It's about innovative ideas for the future. This is definitely a transit where it's all about evolution, and our personal growth is tied to our ability to adapt or innovate with rapidly changing environments, especially those that involve technology or social networking. I think about the internet, right? I think also about major changes in political upheavals and in politics. That's definitely happening in Aquarius. But the collective impact is really the deep transformation that's happening within society's structures. And this is particularly through what is considered like social systems, right? And how technology is influencing social systems. So I really anticipate that we're going to see revolutions in how we organize, communicate, think, you know, potentially leading to breakthroughs. We're going to see more development of AI. We know that AI is developing faster than ever before. I mean, they're saying like every so many months, it's becoming smarter and smarter and smarter. Now it's becoming like more self-aware. We also know with this ingress that we're going to see changes in governance, and whether that's the positive side where it's like maybe there is more freedom in governance, and maybe that is because, you know, there is some kind of turbulence that we're able to kind of get to that point. Other people believe that, you know, moving into a high surveillance future where we don't have a lot of privacy or we don't have a lot of saying things, and that there is these massive kind of changes that happen within society because in some places it's like the small minority that is impacting the majority, and that's creating some challenges. It's hard to say. It's going to be different in all different places, but it will be about how either technology or how the masses are influencing governance. And also, you're going to hear more about, you know, societal issues, and also, you know, social equality. And it's going to be as a result of tension and upheaval that's basically kind of going on in the world, and whether or not we're able to overcome that. I think to see, you know, Saturn and Neptune, which a lot of people would say Saturn, you know, moving through Aries where it's debilitated, the conjunction in Neptune, which it doesn't necessarily know how to lead, and then the sextile to Pluto, it can perpetuate more of some of these Pluto and Aquarius things, that if humans are inherently lost, right, Saturn and Neptune, if they don't know what they stand for, if they're not becoming more independent or self-sufficient, then can we feel the effects of this Pluto crisis looming even more? Absolutely. But also vice versa, right? Like the Pluto in Aquarius, where we are seeing certain structures within society crumbling and breaking down, and we are seeing the darker side of technology, or we are seeing the darker side of, like, you know, major decisions being made on a group level that individuals don't associate with, or they don't agree with, or it's not a part of their vision for the future. It's going to perpetuate more of that Saturn-Neptune thing, where you're going to have people who are going to go, fuck that, I'm going to be off the grid, you know, I'm going to get a hatchet, I'm going to chop some wood, like, I'm going to have a farm, I'm going to learn how to be, you know, more independent. Like, that's not my belief. And so I do believe that even some of the challenging aspects of next year are really meant to wake people up. Something you guys are going to notice for the next 2 years with these aspects is that we're not playing games anymore. Whatever has happened over the last couple of years, if you thought what you've seen is crazy, you haven't seen anything yet. Because some of the things that are going to start happening now are literally going to start to kind of create the divide, where you're going to decide if you're going to go more into the Pluto and Aquarius camp, where you're going to say, okay, let's move along with everything that's being developed in the future, even if that means giving up freedom or giving up privacy or any of that stuff, because everybody else is doing it. And then you're going to see the other camp of people, where you're going to have Saturn and Neptune and Aries, where they're going to say, I'm building my own home, right? We're creating our own community. We are going our own way. We're foraging. We're learning how to hunt. And we don't mind being on the outskirts of society. We don't mind being the outcasts. You're going to start to see that in a very big way. And what's cool and the positive, because there is positive here, is that the North Node has been in Aries for the last almost 2 years now, right? We've had eclipses there. The North Node has been there with eclipses. We've had retrogrades there. Everything has been in preparation for this moment. So if you decide to make that hard, exit from society and you're like, okay, now is the time to go, you can do so. And in many ways, you will be seen probably several hundred years from now as the pioneers, right? And we think about the pioneers and the gold rush and people who have gone and found places and developed cities and towns, or they've been pioneers in certain industries. Like that's what we're going to see for the next couple of years. Is going to be a lot of like pioneering energy. So I anticipate more revolution. That's what I'm anticipating, and I think that yes, we will see that there is going to be some clash revolving around the old systems, because Saturn is the dispositor of Pluto. It's the traditional ruler of Aquarius. P.S. Uranus is also the dispositor of Pluto, and you're going to see Uranus change signs, and it's going to go into Gemini. So yet more change, and they will all aspect each other. Pluto will sextile Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune will sextile Uranus. Uranus will trine Pluto. Holy cow, like you got to look at what's going on. Essentially Aquarius, Aries, and Gemini in your chart, they're all going to be impacting one another. So it's not just one change. It's going to be several different houses that are kind of getting lit up. Probably the other thing I think about with obviously Pluto going into Aquarius, and this is more a Jupiter thing, but Jupiter will go into Cancer, okay? So Jupiter will quincunx Pluto. So they're not going to see eye to eye. So not only will Jupiter square off with Saturn and Neptune, that's going to definitely bring up some moral, ethical issues revolving around rules, regulations, countries changing things, not always aligning with maybe what the globalist agenda is for this dismantling of, sovereignty in certain countries. But Jupiter will quincunx Pluto, and that means that in order for there to be growth, expansion, emotionally, intuitively, within the home, with families, properties, development, it's going to perhaps be excluded, or it's not going to be included in some of these technological developments, or it may be denied access to the internet, or it may be denied certain new technologies, right? So there is something that's kind of not reconciling. So Jupiter is actually kind of the oddball. Most of the year, Jupiter is the oddball. We'll see at the end of 2025, Jupiter will trine Saturn, and then we get a little bit of a break, but Jupiter is definitely the oddball next year. All right, so now we're going to move on. We're going to look at the next ingress, which will be July of 2025. And those of you guys who study astrology or you practice astrology, you're nodding and you're yes, I have known this is coming. But some people genuinely have no idea, and they don't realize or recognize how rare and unusual all of these patterns are to be happening at the same time. So it's kind of cool to look at. Okay, so July 7th, 2025, Uranus goes into Gemini. Okay, so it's been hanging out obviously around Algol. And right now Uranus is retrograde, Saturn is retrograde, Neptune is retrograde. They're all retrograde except for Pluto, pretty much. Uranus going into Gemini is like a whole other thing. I mean, I think about being an American, we have in the United States chart Uranus in Gemini, it's in our 7th house. So we're going to see pretty soon, Uranus is going to be coming back to the Americas, Uranus returns. So that'll be interesting over the next, several years. 2026 to 2030 is where it's going to be most active, I think. But You're taking the planet of change, innovation, technology, freedom, rebellion, zigging and zagging, and you're throwing it into another air sign that's ruled by Mercury. Okay? So Uranus will be also one of those planets that's going to go kind of in and out of the signs. And really, in recent years, it's been quite chaotic for the markets, destabilizing banks. We've seen things like major crypto booms and then the FTX collapse. We have seen major crisis revolving around this looming, kind of financial situation in the world, majorly expensive groceries, resources, critical themes revolving around land, as well as electricity, right? Energy, that's been a big theme. So Uranus going into Gemini. Well, I mean, this is stirring some kind of like mental revolution, and it's only going to be in Gemini until November of 2025. So it's going to go, it'll retrograde and it'll go back into Taurus. So it'll be just a couple months that it's going to give us a sneak preview in the sign of Gemini. The positive is that I see this as a time where there could be sudden insights in, how we think, how we learn, how we communicate. Like that's all going to undergo some kind of radical transformation. And I do think that this is a very restless transit. I feel like, we're going to be ready to explore new ideas or technologies that challenge the status quo, but it's hard to sit still. I think of like Uranus being in Gemini. I think it's going to be a lot about intellectual freedom and possibly really leading us to question established norms or embrace entirely new ways of thinking. It could be that there's new educational methods or platforms, for information exchange. So new ways of learning and freedom through learning, or new different types of certifications or trainings that can be kind of happening. It'll definitely have an impact in television, radio, right? Mail. I mean, I wonder, what is this going to do to the mail system? Are we going to see a big, radio comeback? Is that going to happen? Are there going to be new forms of communications? Perhaps that might happen. Traveling by air, flying cars. I mean, I'm kind of wondering what will come from this transit over a number of years. But I do think that by enhancing communication and intellectual freedom, we can see rapid advancements in technology, particularly in information sharing. It might also foster more democratic flow of information. But I do think that, there is also a risk of information overload. Chaos through connection and communication can be a theme. And remember, in the background, right, now Mercury is going to be strongly tied to Uranus. So same as this year, we've got Jupiter in Gemini, expanding communication, connection, ideas, global conversations. When Mercury turns retrograde, it's bouncing off of Jupiter. So the retrogrades this year feel bigger. So in the future, when we have a Mercury retrograde with Uranus in Gemini, it'll have a pretty significant impact, because it means that it's going to be impacting how we travel, how we get around, how we're thinking, how we're communicating, and it can have a stronger impact on miscommunications, communication breakdown, issues with technology. And part of me wonders, well, if we are so heavily invested in this future with Pluto and Aquarius, where it's like everything is cashless, everything is digital, everything is on the cloud, are we potentially putting ourselves in a position where we are going to be even more so impacted? God forbid we don't have energy. I mean, I think of places around the world where there's been some of these major, catastrophic events, whether it's a hurricane, an earthquake, whether there is some, chaos going on in some country. They don't have power, right? How are they able to transact? Most people use cards, credit cards, debit cards. How are they able to communicate if they can't charge their phone? Right? How are they able to get around if they have a electric vehicle? Things to think about. And so I think about how, if there is a destabilization with Uranus and Gemini, how that's going to impact our ability to get around, connect, and communicate. Oh, and P.S., by the way, this is sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So if there is destabilization going on, how does that limit an individual, Saturn and Neptune? Oh. How is that also impacted by Pluto in Aquarius, where if there's major transformation revolving around society and how all of we connect, how does that quickly aid certain people getting communications, getting around or connecting, or radically transform and make changes in how we connect and how we communicate? Gemini's documents. So I think about digital ID cards for the internet, for driving, for traveling. I think of passports and things like that. If something just gets scanned and you're not dealing with a person and it gets denied, how do you fix that? If you need to have customer service and you've got a real intricate problem and you need to talk to somebody, but you're only talking to an automatic or automated kind of machine or robot or response system, how do you get support? Right? Just kind of looking at it from all angles, guys. I think that globally it'll manifest as breakthroughs in communication, but it can potentially lead to a much more, I think, limited, centralized way of dealing with information and communications or information sharing. I also feel like there is potential, for there to be issues revolving around us being able to kind of get around and travel. I have huge concern for that. There could also be major, conflicts between fact and fiction, and it's also going to be changing our view of like collective truth. And it'll be interesting to see how that manifests, especially because, like I said, Mercury is connected to this. So like when Mercury turns retrograde, we're going to see some big impacts with Uranus and Gemini. Now, the positive is that, if Saturn and Neptune is super determined to be like more independent, self-sufficient, entrepreneurial even, that could spark whole movements and new websites and apps and connections and how-to and teaching people things and being more mobile or learning how to fix your own car or figuring out how to communicate in like independent ways. And I also feel like with Uranus trine Pluto, it can quickly bring the right people together, the right solutions. We could be learning in group methods. We're going to see dramatic changes with neighborhoods, with our communities with Uranus and Gemini. There might be more of an emphasis on smaller pods. Like I think about like teachers, and I think about how there's been so much crap that teachers have had to deal with for many, many years, not getting paid very well, having to provide resources for students, doing that because they really love teaching, they want to help communities. And I just think about how much tax dollars go to public education, and that if that were allocated towards teachers, could teachers create their own small pots? And could they say, well, instead of that money going to the school and they're not getting the best education, what if that money went to teachers? And instead of teaching a classroom of 40 kids, you're able to work with 7, 8, 9 children, and they would get paid a healthy wage and they would be able to educate kids, and the kids would get a better education and they would have the resources they need and it would be better spent. Now, everybody may not agree with me on that, but that's the kind of thing that I think about with Uranus and Gemini, totally changing the education game, especially within communities and for younger people. And then the trine to Pluto is like that major transformation within society when we have that connection that we need with our community. We're going to see some really amazing entrepreneurial opportunities the next couple of years. Amazing. So like if you're really good at what you do, especially Saturn and Neptune and Aries, if you're a coach, if you're a trainer, if you're a welder, if you're a blue collar worker, people who are plumbers, people who are HVAC, who are working with heating and cooling, people who know how to build houses, people who know how to weld, who know how to chop wood and build things. These are going to be some of the most successful people over the next couple of years. And I'm not saying that technological businesses or positions aren't. They could be as well, especially with Uranus trine Pluto. I definitely think that, yes, tech is going to have their thing. We're going to see that. But I'm thinking more about the Saturn-Neptune connection being in Aries, where individuals are going, I need to do something physically that's going to be needed within my community. And also, it might be about you starting a company. When we think about the 11th house, this is the money that we get from the business, right? The money that we get from the business we work from. It's second house to the 10th. So if we work in the 10th, the money comes from the 11th and we spend it in the second. So guess what Pluto in Aquarius could mean, just very generally? A lot of businesses will go under. We're going to see a lot of large businesses that are going to close. We're going to see that there's too much red tape revolving around like federal jobs and programs. And we're going to see a lot of cutting and stuff like that that's going to happen, which, yes, sucks for some people, but it's going to inspire some people with Saturn and Neptune to go, I'm going to go build my own thing. And I'm going to start small and I'm going to start local, or I'm going to be mobile, but it is what it is. And then it's going to end up, being some brand new opportunity. So I do think that, once again, you can't really just look at each of these aspects or each of these ingresses in a vacuum. because that's not good astrology. You're going to get some like cookie cutter regurgitation of, well, this is what Pluto and Aquarius means, you know, or this is what Saturn and Aries means. But the configuration of the sextiles to each other or the trines to one another is putting all of the pieces together to have a better understanding of what's going to be happening all around. I do think one thing I like is the trine from I think Pluto to Uranus. Some people look at that and go, it's chaotic. Yes, right? We are going to see some chaotic stuff. We're going to see lots of changes with vehicles. If you guys haven't recently seen, like, you know, like the fleet, the Tesla fleet of like the self-automated, you know, vehicles or whatever, like crazy. Like if that technology really is what it appears to be, part of me wonders in 10 years time, like, are we going to have our own vehicles? Are we going to have car insurance if we have vehicles that are going to be potentially 10 times safer than individuals driving their car? Is that the Pluto-Uranus trine? I don't know, but possible, right? And also like this merger with, you know, technology and also communications, or our hands, Gemini, right? Our minds even, it could be that. But watch for, you know, revolutionary ideas, innovation, and significant changes within society that is impacting this. Certainly allowing some smaller communities to be a little bit more independent and maybe be like, no, we're not doing that. You know, if some people are going in that direction, that's fine. We're not doing that here. And maybe be more willing to be a little bit more self-governing, right? It's possible. People going, building their own cities. I mean, you're seeing stuff like that in some like media, you know, people who go and buy, you know, so many acres and they're building housing and they're creating their own communities. I mean, that could literally be the Saturn Neptune sextile Uranus. Okay, so we've got Jupiter going into Cancer, and in many ways, I believe this is one of the sweeter energies in 2025. Granted, it's not going to happen till June, so we're not going to see that until, you know, halfway through the year. Let's go back a little bit. All right, so Jupiter is going to go into Cancer, where it's exalted. So Jupiter performs very well in this sign. Obviously, traditionally, we see Jupiter kind of with Sag or with Pisces, but it's in its exaltation in Cancer because it's a sign that's associated with the moon, which is good fortune, emotions, home, family, comfort, security, right? All that stuff. So Jupiter going into Cancer, you know, Jupiter amplifies everything that it touches. So when you look at the Cancer area of your chart, there's something that's going to be expanding there. Granted, and I, being a natal Jupiter in Cancer myself, I feel a little snaked, but that's okay. The beginning of the Jupiter transit into Cancer, which is generally pretty positive, it has some roughness to it. We are going to see that it's going to come into a square with Saturn and Neptune. So it's like a continuation of what we saw in August of 2024 and inevitably December of 2024, where, you know, Saturn's kind of checking Jupiter, not allowing Jupiter to grow too quickly. But it will pass pretty quickly, and that'll be the final kind of square between Jupiter and Saturn. But once again, it's flavored with a Jupiter square Neptune, which is like, I'm really optimistic about this new emotional endeavor, or this expansion of my home or where I'm living. And then the square to Neptune is like, is it what I thought it would be? You know, is it what I believed it could be? You're like, did I deceive myself, or was I deceived, or was I too optimistic? I don't know. It's hard to say. And then just after that, then Jupiter is going to come into a quincunx with Pluto, which I kind of talked about a little bit. But obviously, you know, Jupiter coming into a quincunx with Pluto is going to materialize as like those two not seeing eye to eye. Here, I have an exact example of that here. Where did I put? Where is it? Okay, so basically the inconjunct between, you know, Jupiter and Pluto in these two signs, it's about there being like a challenging but also potentially fruitful period where, you know, new things can emerge, or maybe considering traditional values or family structures, and then also creating a unique blend of innovation, Pluto and Aquarius, and tradition, right? Jupiter in Cancer. So that's going to be right off the bat. You're going to see that in June, square to Saturn and Neptune, and then the quincunx to Pluto. But still, nevertheless, Jupiter does very well in this sign. So having Jupiter go through Cancer will be expanding the Cancer area of your chart. So you're going to need to look. But this is good for intuitive development, home development, family, expanding home. I do feel like the second half of 2025, because we will see Jupiter in the sign, and we will eventually see Jupiter come into a trine with Saturn and Neptune, which will be in Pisces, could be very good for those who have been wanting to buy homes, build homes, start families, expand their home, all of that stuff the second half of 2025. You're going to see that more in the fall. So you got to wait until you kind of get out of that square, obviously, right? I think we're going to find ourselves expanding our personal or emotional boundaries, focusing on creating a safe haven or deepening our relationships, and also an investment in our emotional wealth. So Jupiter in Cancer will do these things. I do feel like it can be helping us when it comes to laws and regulations revolving around our homeland, although it is going to be in direct conflict with what some new order is, Saturn and Neptune, new agenda is, right? To want to dissolve everything. Some people are going to be like, hell no. We're keeping our country, we're keeping our borders, we're keeping our culture. Some people are going to be very against the Saturn kind of Neptune new agenda or like new world that is going to potentially be created. Nationally, there might be a focus on domestic policies and a push towards like more protective or nurturing governance. Good for women, good for families, good for home. I could also see this being like a major boom in the industries relating to home food or cultural heritage, especially the second half of 2025. I think of like bakeries, breweries, businesses that are, putting in pools, kitchen renovations, people who are doing catering, anything like that, growing food from home. That might also be like another theme with, Jupiter square Saturn and Neptune. Some people are going to be like, I live in an apartment. I can't grow food or I can't bake bread. Great. So you have a family member who can, and you're selling it or you're going to farmers markets. That could be a theme. I do think that, my favorite aspect personally is probably going to be when, Jupiter is going to get out of this kind of square and quincunx and it starts coming into the trine. So we will actually see a couple things happen. So Jupiter will trine the North Node. All right. So that looks like that's going to be happening in September. And Jupiter is the ruler of the North Node. So the North Node's in Pisces. So next year we're having eclipses we'll have one in Aries, but we're going to have eclipses basically in Pisces and in Virgo. So with Jupiter trying the North Node, it's like the more that we are expanding our emotions, our intuition, our home, or our family, or we're moving or something revolving around our country, we're able to have more peace, right? More security, more stability. We can rest better. Maybe we feel a little bit more stable. Could it mean that there is a period of extended isolation and separation, right? North Node in Pisces, Saturn will be in Pisces, Neptune will be back. Yeah, but what does that mean? Well, we're spending more time at home, right? Think back to what happened when the North Node was in Cancer in 2020. Everybody stayed home that year, guys, remember? So Jupiter being there in its exaltation, which is going to be trining Saturn and Neptune in the North Node, and you're going to start to see that in September, can mean that if that happens, it's actually a good thing that people are spending more time, they're working from home, they're having families. Like we could see that this is people who are also moving to new places or having new experiences. They're going to countries where they feel like they're in alignment with their philosophy or even with their laws, maybe. And we will then see Jupiter go retrograde. And when Jupiter is retrograde, then it's going to come into a trine with Saturn and Neptune. Now, here's the deal, right? It looks like actually it'll be right before. In November is when Jupiter is going to trine Saturn. So right before Jupiter turns retrograde, which I think is like mid-November 2025, we have now the expansion of home, emotions, family, the Cancer area of your life that's in alignment with the structure, the commitment, the karma, the responsibility, maybe the sacrifice, the giving up, the loss, right? And how that actually creates some harmony between the two, especially because Jupiter rules Saturn. And then Jupiter will go retrograde and it'll still kind of trine Saturn and Neptune a little bit, but it does look like it's going to be pretty much the second half of next year that both Saturn and Neptune are going to be back in Pisces. So we're going to get to about September, and then Saturn and Neptune are getting ready to dip back in, right? And then they're going to come into a trine with Jupiter in Cancer. So we see that expansion. It's almost like, and I've said this many times, but I'll keep saying it, the sacrifices, the commitment, the hard work that we put in 2024, going into 2025 in the Pisces area of our chart, will materialize the end of 2025 in the Jupiter in Cancer area of our chart, right? So there's something that we're almost like we're pacing ourselves a little bit right now. We're pacing ourselves because we're like, okay, eventually there's going to be this expansion. But because Jupiter and Saturn are in a square right now, we need to read more, learn more, think more, reevaluate. Maybe we're juggling too much. So then both of them in October now are retrograde back in Pisces. Jupiter will trine, it looks like most of November. And then you will see Saturn and Neptune come into Aries. And it looks like that's actually going to happen in 2025. I believe it's going to be in February. So first we have Neptune, and then we have Saturn. And I'll talk about this more next year. But when these two come together, the actual conjunction per the minute is going to be in February of 2026. And would you look at this? When it happens, the moon is there, okay? So something's going down around February 20th, 2026. I mean, all of these planets, the dispositor is Mars, and Mars is in Aquarius. So we'll have to see what that means. But Mars is coming into a square with Uranus. So there is going to be some significant shift revolving around money, technology, resources. You know, I wonder if this is going to be that divide where we start to see the financial system kind of go kaput. People are deciding whether or not they want to kind of get on board with that. But that connection will be in play for a little while. And then eventually, like I said, we will see Mars come through there. So even though Mars wasn't conjunct then, you will see Mars, Saturn, and Neptune all in the spring of 2026 that are going to be in the same sign. And P.S. Chiron is still there too, by the way. So that's certainly very colorful. But it looks like, look at that. Even when Mars is coming into connection with Saturn and Neptune, look, Mars is there, right? The moon is there. Mercury is there. So, you know, third week of February, mid-April 2026, something is popping off in a big way. And the one thing I will say, I read something interesting recently that was saying that, yeah, like Mars and Saturn are malefics, right? They are. Like they represent conflict, war, death, you know, being attacked, you know, some kind of heat, some accident. And Neptune can also be something deceptive. We don't see it coming. But when the sun, which is exalted, and the sun does represent the king, when the sun is there, that there is some protection and shielding from some of the harder or harsher Mars-Saturn aspects. So part of me wonders, is this when it happens? Is there some grand emergence? Is there some huge shift that happens for individuals, for humanity, right? The day that we see the conjunction kind of building between Mars and Saturn. So when Mars is pretty much at the midpoint between Neptune and Saturn, the sun is coming into conjunction with Chiron. And it'll be a new moon in Aries. Notice the trend, right? Like spring of 2024, we saw a solar eclipse in Aries conjunct Chiron. This incoming full moon in Aries, which will be on the 17th, conjunct Chiron. New moon in Aries, obviously this is 2026, so this is like, you know, over a year away, conjunct Chiron. From what I've seen as an astrologer, I study the patterns. I look at what's happened in the past. And all of those eclipses, the new moons, the full moons, there's always been a really harsh aspect with Mars that I've seen, what conjunction to Saturn, square to, you know, the moon, whatever. And it's been times of conflict, times of war, times of fighting, times of anger, you know, agitation. And part of me in the back of my head is I'm just thinking, I'm like, this doesn't have to be what some mainstream astrologers are touting as, oh, this is going to be World War III. Because there's a lot of like notable people who are kind of saying that about the spring of 2026, excuse me. For me, I look at this and I'm like, but the sun is there, you know, and all of this is sextiling Pluto. Like, if enough people wake up and say, no, we're not doing that, we're not aiding that, we're not getting involved in that, it could be different. It could be a time where, you know, individuals are becoming empowered. They have the ability to kind of create change. And it is going to be about standing up for themselves, and it could very much be about fighting back. You know, that I will not deny. But I've said that all along, that the North Node in Aries and the eclipses in Aries was going to be about self-defense. And I was pretty bang on with a lot of that stuff. So, you know, I still see some of that. I do believe that it is possible to be, you know, fighting for anti-war, pushing for anti-war, individuals saying, I won't fight, military members saying, we will not get involved, we will not do this. But it could also be conflict and war being waged upon the individuals. Thankfully, Pluto's in the background with the sextile, which is saying if enough people say no, if enough people change, you know, the revolution doesn't have to be this like bloody thing. It could be something that can be incredibly empowering, but it's gonna be a ripple effect. Sextiles from Aries to Aquarius means that when individuals rise up and they start to recognize their own power, their connection with their higher self, with the divine, they see the God within them, they learn how to be leaders, they spark the revolution, right? So yeah, I mean, that's, there's a lot going on. We'll talk even more about this as we get closer. I will be obviously, you know, doing lots of videos. This is just my first kind of looking over and seeing what 2025 kind of looks like. I will be talking to you guys obviously in depth when we do the New Year's video. I'm thinking about putting together like an in-depth 12 signs and kind of offering that if people want to like purchase that, if you want like an audio file for your sun, moon, or your rising sign for 2025 and talking about the most important kind of transits. I'm also going to be opening up a select number of spots. I'm going to be offering a new service for people who are interested. I'm going to have a session that I'm only going to give to probably about 10 or 12 people for a really deep dive to look completely at the entire year ahead. So I'm still putting that together, but I'll have that out for you guys probably in the next month or so. For those of you guys who want to have a recording where I look at your personal astrology and I give you my laundry list of the hot zones, the most important dates, you know, when to do what, to travel, to focus on work, health, money, relationships. And I will be putting all of that out for you guys pretty soon. I'm just getting everything organized right now. I just finished my calendar, so one thing at a time. But please do leave me a comment below. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear back from you guys on your thoughts on some of this stuff. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the bell button below. I will be back on Thursday. We're going to be talking all about the Libra profile. So I know some of you guys have been asking about that, but we're going to be doing that on my next video. Otherwise, I hope this is helpful in getting a little bit of a sneak peek into the astrology of 2025. I will catch all of you guys back here very soon. Take care.